Welcome to my pseudo podcast where I basically just talk to myself like how I normally talk to myself. In this podcast, I want to discuss my personal findings or understanding of the death penalty and executions and legal killings and how I feel about it and how I think most people would feel about it and how some people may feel about it and how not many people, would feel about it, and just gauge from there, initially just how the world views the death penalty and just mapping that out, essentially. So I think my first discussion, of course, is what is the death penalty? I feel like a lot of people would have an idea of what the death penalty is. It's essentially like, I guess we could put it down to the most literal stance, which is illegal killings. And it's this idea of killing someone based on the actions they've done, like, cases of people being killed for being, gay, or women being smart back in the day, and considering that witchcraft or stealing, or, committing like heinous acts for currently now, back then it would be like probably like espionage. I mean, there are cases where espionage is still now, but like, back then it would be a case of like espionage, going against the king's back or something like that. There was this idea of killing people in multiple ways to get this point across of don't mess with us, or don't mess with this authority that we have. And you see France introducing the guillotine, you see the English introducing witch burning and hanging going around for stealing back in like 1822. And it's, to many people, it may seem as if this sets this basis of, control over the good and evil of this world. But as we evolve as humans, we begin to realize where we lack or slack off in these attempts to control or to maintain this sense of humanity. If anything, humanity, and ignoring or avoiding anarchism, which is, everything just going to chaos, no control at all. And there can be some debate of what could be considered good death penalties, or good executions, or good legal killings. But it's such a thin line that it's really hard to really consider it lawful or good without really thinking about the true meaning behind why you're doing it, which is kind of the topic that I label this as now, which is from my title. Let me Emotional control and release is essentially what I'm trying to discuss in this. Emotional control and release. That's essentially what I sum up the death penalty as, and executions and legal killings. Now, I may have done a lot of research on, like, the ways these are being done, research of, like, how do these go about and stuff like that. But I don't want to go over, like, all of that, because I'll definitely be, like, overwhelmed by the amount of... You might be even overwhelmed by the amount of things that you just find out from learning about the death penalty, and just, like, how screwed and skewed and, like, stupid it can be. In any case, there are a lot of killings that are based on, like I said, maintaining control over, revolutions, and just anything to mess up the balance of the society that's being built in this community. You're familiar with your basic, like Ted Bundy and majority of serial killers. I'm kind of blanking on their names at the moment, but the majority of serial killers and things like that. But, like, there's this idea of control over, who deserves to live and who doesn't. We as human beings believe that we have some sense of control over who deserves to live and who doesn't, in terms of crimes committed by people who are just like us, And to me, I just find that really interesting that we can consider that lawful and just. Yeah, I just... You're telling a society that based on... So, for instance, you may be a group of cows, and one cow is just messing up entirely and causing, I don't know, essentially just killing another cow. Let's just imagine a cow killing another cow, and then you as a society or a group of randomly selected people decide that this crime is wrongful and heinous and doesn't deserve any second chance, and we should just kill him. We should just kill that cow because he's different from us. He's a cold-blooded killer, and these things can be traumatizing. If we go back to just humanizing this, these things can really be traumatizing to our society and to the people that it literally impacts. I was watching a Jubilee video about, these group of people pretending to be a jury, and they had to decide to kill someone or not based on... It was a school shooter or something like that. It was based on a true story, but then they kind of like fixed some of the things that happened near the end. And this one lady was really she was really for the death penalty because her name is, I believe it's not really that important, but I might as well just include a name if I can. Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to grab her name. I don't know. I didn't put that down, but she mentioned that murder is like dropping a pebble in a pond. There's ripples. It affects so many people, and those people are still alive. And they see this happening before them, and they can't do anything about it. Like, this is such a difficult thing for them to really grasp, that this person is not out of my life. And I think that the basis for the death penalty has always seemed to be this case of, it's not about emotion. It's not about your emotions toward the situation, but entirely, that is essentially what it is. The death penalty is this idea that we can control, the emotions of those seeing the effects of the death penalty, and release the emotions, or at least, the bad emotions of those impacted by the death penalty. Those who personally have a connection to the person who's being killed, legally with quotation marks, and, the people who lost someone because of that person being killed by the death penalty. And, there's always this idea that it's not about emotions, it's about, like, what's right and wrong. But I believe that it really does tie down to a societal understanding and belief that this is beyond human. This is beyond human, and it does not deserve to be in this world. There are so many things in this world that could be viewed as doesn't belong in this world, but because of our historical or our cultural backgrounds, there are these, things that just overlap, and they just, like, they make sense to other people, but to, certain people like us, it just, Americans, it doesn't make sense to us at all. Like, why would we, eat animals, eat dogs, or like lizards or stuff like that, but Asians do that. It's not something that really crosses our mind, but as you pinpoint the history behind these things, you kind of grasp, the idea behind why. You kind of grasp this idea behind why these things happen. And then you just, you go from there, instead of, viewing it from a personal standpoint. But I think everything in this world is essentially personal, because we are all, I've always been really, like, hesitant about saying this, but, like, we all bleed the same, and we're all human, and there's nothing that's gonna really change that. I'm sorry this is a really long podcast, but I just really am passionate about this, because it's just hard to fathom that this is such a thing that happens, and it can be really draining, but I definitely want to talk about it. And I also want to touch on the topic of, I want to go back to this, like, idea of how it can be labeled as good, and then just, like, completely skewed and messed up, or, like, just began to really slack in, like, its main, in what it was supposedly, supposed to be about. After, the majority of slavery was considered, done, and you can't own slaves anymore, black people anymore, Negroes anymore, or, like, other people, other groups, indigenous groups who are exposed to slavery. You can't own those people. You start putting them in these, these boxes, these prisons, and since they're in these prisons because they're committing crimes that, you know, happen essentially because they're in these poor, institutionalized areas. After you start putting them in these prisons, you have this grasp over this our community, as Black people. You have this grasp over us because you entitle yourself to the ability that these people are below trash. You know, you begin to think that, you begin to articulate this idea that they're in prison, and now it just becomes slavery all over again because you can control them in the situation because they've done something beyond or wrong and deserving of prison. And then you begin to do these, you know, like they start working in prison and doing all these like mundane things that they don't need to do, like picking like picking wheat, as they did like back in a while back. Not wheat, I'm not sure exactly what, but like it's not really picking, but like getting rid of it or something like that, weed and stuff like that. And just doing these like these mundane tasks that just don't need to be a part of prison because it's not essentially what prison should be. And I'll touch on that a little bit more as to what prison should essentially be. Hopefully I do remember, but you have this ability now to use this death penalty as a way to kill off this community that you don't appreciate, you don't like. I grabbed this graph showing that Black murderers sentenced to death were about 80%. Like overall, I think this is overall of like, I don't know exactly. I think it was like 2018 or around there. But yeah, so it's out of 100%. But like Black murderers sentenced to death were 80%, and Black convicts sentenced to death by all white juries were 20%. And I've kind of lost the I'm sorry, I was doing a lot of research for this, and I just kind of like pinpointed like the things that I really wanted to talk about, but like I kind of lost the initial basis of it. But like the essential point from what I've been researching is that there's just a huge incarceration rate of Black people, and minorities in general, but mostly Black people, being sentenced to the death penalty, sentenced to death, more than any other race, like more than white people, more than it's just not needed at all. It's just like it really unbalances this whole idea of what it was supposed to, or it's supposed to be, and it's just really targeted, and it just really doesn't make any sense why it is the way it is. And then you have like, as we go more into like the messiness of it, if we put aside like like if we've already discussed it, like maybe like the majority of death penalties and people who are incarcerated, and like the amount of Black people that are in these prisons, you put aside that and you start realizing like other things that are so messed up about this death penalty idea, like how 4% of people who were sentenced to death were actually innocent, And that's like just only the cases that we know of, you know. Like those are only the cases that we've you know, checked and seen from, you know, the evidence, the lack thereof, the lack of evidence, or people just saying yes because saying that they did it, or saying that they're guilty because they just want to get this over with, or they hope for like some kind of clarity, or you know, or not really clarity, but just like it may be an easier death penalty. Sorry, they may get you know, sentenced to death, as in like not killed, I guess intentionally, but like more so going through the, you know, your prison life. So I guess like life sentence. And like, so from a few of these, like from what I've gathered from the deathpenalty.com, I think that's what it's called, but like I've gathered that like 2/3 of exoneration cases, that's about like 125 exoneration cases. 2/3 would be like, yeah, so like 67. So sorry, no. So in total it would be 125 exoneration cases, and then 2/3 would be 67.6%, I believe, have included a false accusation or perjury. Like official misconduct, perjury, or false accusations was more likely in cases involving defendants of color, which is 70.7% of Black and 93.8% of Latina exonerees. And in cases in which exonerations took longer, 84.8% of cases in which exonerations took 21 or more years. False or misleading forensic evidence was present in 31.9%, 59, I believe that is, of exoneration cases, and false fabricated confessions were implicated in 16.2%, 30 of exonerations. Just by those, you know, those percentages should not be so high, dude. Like if I'm just being forward with you, those percentages should not be so high. Some people are just getting lazy with their idea of what the death penalty is. Like, this shouldn't be the way it is, you know? And you just get frustrated by the laziness, and you advocate this, like, this is all for, you know, the greater good, or, you know, control, or it's lawful or good. It's all just like really, it's hard to really like think that maybe they're being purposeful, or just somewhere along the line they just became really idiotic, you know, and didn't really care at all. And it's really hard to tell with America, because we can be really, you know, why am I saying we? I'm not from here. But they can be really, you know, misleading in their own systems, and like the cases of like our debt. And that's just a whole nother topic. Just like the amount of debt that we have to owe to ourselves, which is like in the trillions, I believe, or something like that. But anyways, and then the next thing I wanted to talk about was just like how it's unintentionally an act of emotion only. I mean, I did already touch a little bit about that, but like, I just want to say that, like, you know, I truly believe that everything that we do has a sense of emotion. You know, it falls under like the 7 deadly sins of life, like, you know, gluttony or greed or lust. And you know, there's a sense of want for power and control over these situations. And even for a society, you want to be able to have control. You know, you want to feel safe. You want your family to feel safe. And that's, you know, the idea of why death penalty is what it is, you know. It was believed to be this way to bring comfort, make people feel a little better, even though, you know, it doesn't solve anything. Because I personally know that if someone killed my mother, I would be so drained, but I would be so furious at the same time. Like, I can't accept this person living in this world, you know. Like, that's just, it would be really hard. But I think the part about life that people really need to grasp is that, you know, it doesn't change that they're gone, you know. And the best we can do for ourselves is heal. And everyone has their way of healing. But as long as you're healing and you focus on that healing, you know, then the world seems a little bit less chaotic. And you begin to like touch on this idea of what happens to this killer, you know, like they're still, you know, in prison. And I remember also watching some stuff on Jubilee about like this too. Jubilee's a really good channel where they have some really interesting conversations. But like this idea of seeing if there's a possibility to correct the minds of these people, these killers, you know, not really correct them, but just like the reason that people kill is because, you know, thinking back into like, you know, hot summers and, you know, crime rates going up and stuff like that. It's just because of our mentality, you know, our mental capacity and what we grasp from the world and just everything that's happened to us. And there's some cases by like, you know, psychopaths, and I believe I do get into that a little bit more later, but like there's just so many like things toward it that, you know, you really just gotta like focus on the basis or the brief abstract of what you want to get out of this. You want what you want to, you know, you want this world to be. And then you can just go from there. You can just go from there. Take the steps. Don't go back into your habits. Don't scour off to a whole different whirlpool or something like that, you know? It's a lot, but like being able to find ways to, even if it's not possible, you know, it's still, prison is still like a key component in maintaining some sense of stability, even though it's, you know, it's in our own actions of doing it. And you can't really like, you gotta just pick your battles sometimes too. But like I feel like death is such a literal thing to every single person on this planet that it shouldn't be taken by anybody legally or illegally. And in order for us to even begin to prevent it illegally, we need to stop this whole legal killing, because that's just, no. If I could put it in a better word, it's just, that's the only word I could say. It's just no. It doesn't make any sense. And you're just, I don't know. I guess it's like, you know, I do have this like underlying idea as to why in some cases people believe that it's a good thing, but like when it really ties down to it, like if you just start thinking about it, like what if you were in that situation? Do you want some random jury to decide you're killing? No, you don't. And to touch more on that too, on the jury, this would be a surprise to you, but like they like if there's a bunch of people who in the jury, and I've always been like really interested in this because like I don't know if they tell you before you go into jury duty, but like or like if you're in a case of like some serial killer that's most likely gonna get the death penalty or something like that, like they choose the jury during death penalties in such a weird and probably overlooked way. They choose it in a manner of if they're not for it, then it's really low that they're in there. Like they're rarely in these cases if they aren't for it. And it's always the people who are like pro death penalty, and that is so it's speechless, to be honest with you. That's just my reaction to that. It's just speechless to believe that you can control that in that manner. And I don't know, like even if you're speaking for the people or the people are speaking, the society or this jury is speaking, and they are able to make decisions as to what happens. There's a sense of freedom, but there's a sense of controlled freedom, for those people who like truly believe that this is the right thing. There's an avenue for that, but people who don't, there's no avenue, there's no way for them to speak their truth on this matter. And I mean, overall, this whole podcast so far, I've just been talking about like some ideas as to why it needs to stop. But like when brought to its realist form, I believe it needs to stop because it's not truthful in manner at all. It's not helpful. It's this idea of I believe I forgot what it's called, but like they had a specific word for it. I can't exactly remember the name, but like it's this idea of you can't. It doesn't help to. It doesn't fix this idea of committing crimes when you do death penalties. If anything, it supports it more because people begin to have this idea that even if I kill people, what's the point? I'm gonna die anyways, and if that's what's gonna happen, I might as well just do what I want to do now, And to think about it so morbidly, that's just what it really is, and it just doesn't help. It doesn't support people in those situations. It doesn't guide them. People who are, thinking of killing, it doesn't do anything at all. And I believe that's just something that needs to stop. And back to like the racially like percentage of things, but like I remember watching this video. It just said that like 35% of black people have been put on death row since 1976, which is that's just crazy to me. And we're talking about America, And I don't know, it's wild to believe that happens. And that's just the main idea as to why this needs to stop. It just doesn't help stop these killings, and it doesn't help those in mourning. And overall, it just doesn't help showcasing it. The times are just way different now with social media, and us evolving as a world that is trying to rewrite our wrongs. It just doesn't work. And I also want to touch on some of the devil's advocate of this. The what ifs and the whatabouts. I want to touch on what if they're a psychopath with zero remorse? They were born that way, and they just you can't help them. I think that's where things get really really surprising to me, I guess. I feel like there's some psychopathic tendency in everyone, because we are humans and we're sinful. I mean, it's not to the extent of what people are. We all have these underlying thoughts in our mind that corrupt us all. But for people in those situations, I think that the best thing to do is just lock them up, or keep them locked up, and still not give up on that. Even if it's not possible, it's still a good thing to maintain this sense of home training, and just trying, instead of putting your time and effort into these extravagant plots and ways of doing these things. Focus on the basis of human love and human care, even if it seems like it's just not possible to fix. You may not be able to bring back an arm. You may not be able to bring back some people's or someone's arm and legs, but you can sure help them, find ways to cope in the world. And then you got cases where it's self-defense. Luckily I haven't really seen anything about that, but I've been thinking about it a little bit, self-defense killings, and in the way in which way how they kill, I guess. And even for the cases of do they get arrested or put in jail? And I believe there are cases where that happens, but death penalties, I don't believe that's happened, which is a good thing. It's really good. If you know anything about that, definitely let me know. And then you got espionage cases. This is something I was thinking about a lot too. I mean, not a lot, but when I thought about it, I was just yeah, I'm getting chills now just thinking about it, because it's a case of Nazis and people you're having wars with that are just not in their right mind at all, and then you paint America as a good country because they're fighting against those countries. But in cases of espionage, you're I believe I'm saying this right. I hope espionage is the right word for this, or just spies. They really crumble the system of the country, and I feel back then it would have had such a important impact, because it showcased the country's wide, I guess, yeah, it really is just a showcase of their power and respect for their country, in specific ways that you label it. There are many cases of this, it could be a really corrupt country killing another corrupt country's espionage person, and it just in cases fear into them, but like there's also cases where they're a good country, and to have people in the country that have done wrong and they could be manipulative and stuff like that, it's terrifying for people. I think in cases like that, even still, I wouldn't kill people, spies, but like, it would make sense to, like, you can't really change their ways because of their cultural background, you can't really change that at all. And that's something that just rings in your mind. And I guess like being able to find ways, it's always about finding ways to like to help them cope in this new environment, and just show them exactly how they've been manipulated, and I guess trying to overrule that like idea. But I guess like I feel like I'm being very like I don't think neutral is the word, but like back and forth, because at the same time, like you shouldn't really control how people feel or act, you can't control that. And you can help, you can try, but like at the same time, it's all based on your cultural background, and if that's what you believe, then that's what you believe. And I don't have any I shouldn't have any hearsay in how that acts out. I mean, like, the only case where that could be really, challenging, and I would really act about is, cannibalism. Cannibalism is definitely not a thing that you want going around. It's just, it defies human love and human care. And I mean, like, definitely killing, but it shouldn't really be, like, as I'm saying, it shouldn't be a matter of death penalty. But yeah, well, I'm talking about, like, cultural acceptance. But yeah, you shouldn't be killing people, because that also defies the whole aspect of human love. Yeah. My tangents. And so the next thing is, I really wanted to touch this as well: the flaws in human nature and the dark reality. I'm not sure I'm able to curse in this, but we're really messed up. Like, as a society, as a world, we are messed up. We're screwed. From climate change to political to racism to human decency, we are messed up, my friends. Like, I read somewhere, this is the last one too. So I read that Saudi Arabia still does crucifixions. And that just blows my mind because of how misplaced that is in our culture, in this world today, to believe that happens. We are really messed up, and at the same time, like, we're messed up because we don't accept that we're messed up. And that's really hard to debate and really talk about, because accepting the parts of us, like our psychopathic parts, or parts that just like seem misplaced in this society, is the first step to not only self-love, but humility. If I'm saying this right, it's accepting I guess it wouldn't really be humility. It would be more, well, yeah, it would be humility, but I guess that would be like a third thing. The second thing would be like our awareness to, simply being ourselves and not trying to be anything else. And I mean, that can be really messed up in scenarios of being like psychopaths and stuff like that. But I mean, like, as I speak of the dark reality, since I am speaking on those terms, accepting ourselves in our corrupt and messed up ways is wholeheartedly this idea of life. Instead of hiding who we are and trying to fit in, things just get dragged out, Things just get dragged out, and it becomes a whole new mess, a whole new situation that impacts so many people without it needing to impact other people. And I consider that the dark reality because in terms of killing and, rape and just the most horrific things that we do in this world, most of the people who, like, I wouldn't say most, but like people who don't show any remorse or apathy are probably the most like realist people, because they don't hide their frustration, they don't hide that. And that is so gross to be thinking about, but like it's the sad reality, because we don't take part in our frustration. And I speak like, I don't know, it's just really hard to word that, it's hard to word this idea that these things happen due to frustration and being upset at this world, and everything that we do. It's hard to really word that. I'm getting really like iffy about whether I should even share this, but like I think that we really deny our feelings, and it becomes so much more. It becomes those cases. It becomes those, it becomes people like Jeff Epstein and all those, people that we hear about. It becomes so much when we don't accept and release our frustration and talk about it, and be transparent. And when you hide who you are, there are a couple things that happens. It's a buildup. It's a buildup of that, and it's also, it causes a lot more messes than it needs to be causing. Building up these things doesn't really help. So how do we stop this? How do we stop all this how do we stop illegal killings and executions and death penalties and just the many facets of the world? We communicate. We donate to organizations that are trying to make a change in this world, trying to host campaigns and, free people who are on death row. There's this group called Amnesty International that, their main goal is to free those in death penalty cases, those who are being exonerated. I think that's what the word would be for it. But you find these outlets, you share, you do petitions, you bring awareness to your thoughts on the death penalty. Like I said, you donate, and you simply just get involved in this idea. And I think there are some like major ways to, like, for instance, there needs to be a reformation in prisons. This idea of see, I'm back to prison now. This idea of prisons being such a bad place needs to be really changed, because prisons shouldn't be about more pain and agony for people who, do wrong things. It should be a way to prevent them from continuing to do these bad things. Allow them to, helping to not always, because sometimes there are people who can't change, but allow them back into some state of society, if even possible. You attack these young kids who are in these institutionalized areas. You attack them from a young age. You educate them in these, simply educate them. Educate them in their culture, for Black people, it's just knowing more about themselves and where they come from, and you help them, you support them in any way possible. You don't give them false things, or you try and get these kids out of these areas where majority of the time they're being brought up into these bad areas that form them into criminals, or put them in gangs and doing these undoable things. And I mean, you always see those cases where being in those situations have changed their lives, but to prevent this from always happening, prevent us from living this life, from Black people or minorities from living such a frustrated and drained and always angry life, you simply be a human and help these areas. Community is really important, and going out there and doing the best that you can with what you can do, what you're good at. You be truthful in that manner, and you do what you can, instead of always focusing on other countries. Why don't you just help the country that you're in, the people that you're around. It's one problem with churches: they barely focus on the community, but they focus on other countries. It's crazy to believe that, but that's my 2 cents. That's my 2 cents there. It may take a long time, but that's the idea. And it's also, these things happen also because of the frustration of being in that situation, of being poor and being raised in an area where you don't have everything that you would like, and your parents are really stressed out because of work, and they start yelling and they start fighting, and you end up feeling disconnected from this world, and you find other ways to cope. And that's kind of just how things really start. For cases where, it's like psychopaths and it's not really readable, it's like you kind of have to gauge. I mean, it should all just fall under the same. It should all just fall under the same, way of thinking, engaging with these people in these bad areas. And it will definitely go down, these crime rates and all these things will definitely go down when you start to just act humane, or you be a human being and show love and be caring. And yeah, that's my thoughts on the death penalty, executions, and legal killings, and several aspects of that. It's not all black and white. But or I guess I should say it is all black and white. Like, as in, killings are all black and white, and there shouldn't be any right way or wrong way of killing. It should all be working towards not killing, the normal way of dying, accidents and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know why I say accidents. I mean, I guess I mean like natural dying, natural death. like the good old days. Whatever. But yeah, that's my 2 cents. And thank you for listening. I may have said some really dark things in there, and yeah, I just wanted to touch base on multiple aspects of it rather than just speak from a humane sense. I know that like there are ideas out there that aren't humane, and it's embracing those ideas and thinking about them that really matters, even though it's difficult. Like, it's in this world. Get involved and do what you can with the time that you have. Thank you for listening.